Well, I'm Big Mac, and I've been married to the brain for 32 years. I'm the subject of most of the books and the DVDs if you decide to buy any of them today. We're very honored to be here with you today. Thank you. We travel the world, and with COVID, we have become more Zoom-orientated, so it's nice to actually get to a live audience and really feel the energy and so on. Talking about books and so on, there are specials here. There's a 2-book special. In fact, this book is not even in the market yet. It's called Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. I brought some with me. It gets launched on the 2nd of March, and it has a lot of Dr. Lee's latest research and so on. And that's paired with a special called 101 Ways to Be Less Stressed. So together it's $30, and you save yourself $12. And then we have a 4-book special, the Mind Toolbox, and that's also at the back there. So I'm going to leave you with Caroline, and I thank you for the opportunity to talk to all of you today and to be here with you today. Thank you.
Hi. How are you all? Good. You ready to clean up your mental mess? Yes. Sounds good. So I've got some brains here, and this is a preserved real brain, if you believe me. And that's a toxic thought, and that's a healthy thought. So if you've ever seen me teach before, I always teach with these props because it's so much easier to understand the whole concept of the mind and the brain and all that stuff when you've got props. And I've got lots of slides, and I am very much in favor of honoring your intelligence because humans are brilliant. You are absolutely brilliant. So you're going to see brain slides, you're going to see slides of research, but I promise I will explain everything. The reason being is that when you have knowledge and you shift your attitude and you get skills, when you get all 3 of those, which is how I teach, you are going to be able to apply this in your life. I don't want you just to listen to this message and think, oh, this is great, but then you get all rah-rah now. This must transform your life. You need to apply this. Why? Here's the reason. You can go 3 weeks without food. Believe it or not, you can. You can go 3 days without water. You can go 3 minutes without oxygen, but you don't even go 3 seconds without using your mind. Okay, so your mind is always with you. You go to sleep with your mind, you wake up with your mind, you choose your clothes with your mind, you read your texts with your mind, you scroll Instagram with your mind, you go for your workout with your mind, or you don't go for your workout with your mind. You gossip about your friend with your mind. You read your research or whatever. You do your work. You are always using your mind. At night, you're still using your mind. Okay, so there's different types of mind. And what you need to understand is what mind is, what the brain is, because the mind is not the brain. It's 2 separate things, even though in today's media and discussions around this topic, a lot of people use the mind and the brain interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. So I'm going to teach you about that today, and then everything essentially that I'm teaching you is the science of renewing your mind. So let's just take for a moment renewing. Renewing is ing. For those of you that still remember grammar, that's present continuous. So present continuous means you're supposed to always be what? Renewing. It means continuously doing something. Do you get that? So if we're told to be renewing our mind, it means that all day long and all night long, you're supposed to be renewing your mind. Hook that onto the scripture, bring all thoughts into captivity. Now, I'm just saying parts of the scriptures. All thoughts doesn't say the ones you feel like doing now and then, or just on Sunday, or maybe half the day, or whatever. It is all thoughts. So, ladies, you are creating and using anywhere between 8,000 to 180,000 thoughts while you're awake. All of those are supposed to be brought into your consciousness. All of those are supposed to be regulated and renewed. So that means that you're supposed to be constantly aware of your thoughts and checking out if they are actually renewed or not. And if they aren't, renew them. I'm not just creating some hard work for you. I'm just telling you what the Bible says. And the Bible is the story, and science tells us how the story works. So I'm a scientist. I've been one for 38 years. I've been in this field for almost 4 decades. I've been studying the mind-brain connection. I practiced clinically for 25 years. And I do research. I still do clinical trials. I've been researching for 38 years. I tell you that to tell you I know what I'm talking about. So when it comes to the mind and the brain, we don't get taught this message properly. We kind of think, okay, I'll drink my green juices, go do the workout, and in between, somewhere down the line, I'll manage my stress. That's not going to work for you, and it's not working for you. And we actually live in an era, besides the pandemic, pre-pandemic, we were already a complete mental mess, which is why the name of my podcast is called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, and why the name of this most recent book is that's coming out on the 2nd of March, that's on pre-order, and I'll be telling you about that, is called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, because that's what I'm going to help you do. Clean up your mental mess. It starts right now, right here, and it never stops for the rest of your life, because you're human, and if you're human, you're going to keep making mental messes. Sorry, but that's just the way it is. Okay, so I still do, even though I'm in the field. I'm married for 34 years, I've got 4 kids, and believe you me, I still make a mental mess. But there's a difference. I understand what it means and how to manage my mental mess. And that's what I want to teach you. And that's why you need to get your hands on this book. And that's why you need to get your understanding around what I'm teaching you. Because if your mind is a mess, your life is a mess. Guaranteed. That is why we are supposed to bring all thoughts into captivity, and we're supposed to be renewing our life, which is really what prayer is. The Bible also says pray continuously. Renewing, bring all. All of this means that your whole conscious mind, when you're awake, is supposed to be in a state of prayer. How do you do that? By constantly capturing your thoughts and evaluating them. I'm going to teach you how to do that. So I'm giving you the science of how to renew your mind and bring all thoughts into captivity. Because you've got to stop using Scripture as a magic potion and God as a genie, because it doesn't quite work. Or Scripture as a Band-Aid, which is also what we do. If you've got a big pussy wound, and I'm going to be absolutely gross, and it's oozing pus everywhere, and you whack on a Band-Aid, but you don't resolve the core issue of why you have that wound in the first place, and why the pus is there in the first place, the Band-Aid will do nothing. Okay, so you have to know how to strip off the Band-Aid, look and do the painful work of finding out what's going on, get the surgery or whatever it is to fix the problem. So you're going to be learning to do your own brain surgery without the blood, because that's literally what you're doing. You see, your mind is you. Your mind is you, how you uniquely think, feel, and choose. If I had to pick a volunteer and take your brain out your head, I would have a nice bloody brain in my hands and a dead person and a dead brain. And then we could stare at that brain all day long, and it would never do anything except eventually just die, just disintegrate. So the point that I'm making is your brain does not make you do it. Okay? And you'll see a lot of research saying, this is my brain on this is my brain on how to choose shoes. I had to say that because I like shoes. This is my brain on whatever. Okay? Your brain can't do anything without you, because it's part of your physical. And you will see that your physical is 1% of who you are. Your mind is 99% of who you are. Your mind is you, the you made in God's image, the you that is able to think and feel and choose. Very powerful. So when you understand you, which is how you think, feel, and choose, you can self-regulate that. I'm also a neuroscientist, and I have seen from my research that you can do this every 10 seconds. So that means I'm not going to ask you to check, to put your iPhone watch or your phone on a timer, and every 10 seconds, beep, beep, beep. No, I'm just telling you to be constantly aware. When you're awake, start learning to self-regulate. Mind renewal is mind management. You need to learn the art of mind management, which is self-regulation. You've got to self-regulate every 10 seconds. That's prayer. Prayer, mind management, self-regulation, renewing of the mind. These are all the same things. And I'm going to teach you, as I said, how to do it. So you're going to learn how to clean up your mental mess. This book's due to be released on the 2nd of March. We have a few which we managed to get from the publisher to sell here, where they don't like us selling it before, but there are a few here. But pre-order, because there's bonuses, and I will tell you about those later. So let me teach you the stuff first. You're going to learn about the Neuro Cycle. Neuro means brain, cycle means to cycle, move. So you're going to learn how to use your mind to change your brain. Your brain is always changing. Did you know that? Back in the 80s, when I started studying, we were told the brain couldn't change. And I said that that's a ridiculous question. You can watch my TED Talk on this. And I did some of the first neuroplasticity research in my field in the 80s. And what I showed was that you can have a damaged brain, but if you understand your mind and how to use it, you can change your brain. I've continued to do the research, and I'll show you that today. And I will show you that you can learn to control things like anxiety and depression by an improved factor of 81%. You can improve anxiety and depression by 81%. 1% will change your life. 81%, you will never be the same. We're going to learn that mental health is not an illness, like we've been told. Mental health is not an illness. You do not need a disease label to validate the pain that you're experiencing. Depression and anxiety and split minds and disassociation and scary words like schizophrenia are not illnesses. They are responses to an underlying issue that's going on. They are responses to adverse circumstances. If someone has been raped, abused, bullied, been in war, etc., that is going to create, that's toxic experience. You have a toxic response just to cope because your brain is wired for love, which is survival. So therefore you're going to build toxicity in your brain, and it's painful, so you push it down. We don't know how to deal with it. If you're a young child and you've been raped, you don't know how to deal with that. So you push it down, and it becomes trauma that invades your life. But it's not an illness, but it affects your behavior, your mind, and creates things like depression and anxiety, which are warning signals, not illnesses. So we're going to set you free from a lot of stuff today, because research shows that if you adopt the label, the clinical label of I am clinically depressed, you can literally chop 20 years off your lifespan just by that label. You see, before COVID, before we got hit by the pandemic, we were already such a mental mess. We saw in the mid-90s, we saw changes starting to happen in the mid-90s. And what was that change? For years, for decades, people have been living longer. Do you agree? With the advances of medicine and technology, people have been living longer. But that trend started reversing in the mid-90s. By the mid-2000s, it was confirmed that the trend of people living longer had reversed, which means that people are not living longer. So we entered the pandemic already with a mental mess, with a whole issue of people not living longer like we thought they were. People are actually dying younger from preventable lifestyle issues and diseases. How can we be in such an advanced age medically and technologically and know everything that we know, yet people are dying younger than they should? And you know the age bracket most affected, which is probably a lot of you in here, is between 24 and 65. So people in the prime of their life are dropping dead for 8 to 25 years younger than they should from preventable lifestyle issues. So if it's preventable, it means you can prevent it. If it's lifestyle, it's everything to do with you and what you do from the time you open your eyes in the morning. What are you doing with your eyes in the morning and your mind when you read that text, or you scroll Instagram and you read that comment, or you compare yourself, or you get that comment from your boss, or that thing from your friend, or life's whatever, and life hits you. And then there's all the stuff that's going on, the financial challenges, this challenge, that challenge. What are you doing? That's all mind-driven. Remember, your mind is always with you. If you don't understand your mind, your brain is going to be affected anyway. So if you don't control your mind, your brain is still being affected, but it's being affected in the wrong way. And your body. I'm going to show you right down to the level of your DNA how when you don't control your mind, you pretty much damaging your brain and your body. But if you do control your mind, you can reverse that process almost immediately, which is why I can make the statistical claim from my research that when you learn how to manage your mind, which is an instruction, renewing the mind, when you learn how to capture thoughts and renew the mind, you will improve your control of things like anxiety and depression by 81%. Who doesn't want to? So just on that note, I give you total 100% permission, and you need to give yourself permission to be okay about feeling depression in the first place. Depression, anxiety, sadness, despair, frustration, anger, irritation do not make you a bad person. They make you a very normal human being who is just battling in life. Because life is filled with abnormal and adverse circumstances. Depression and anxiety through COVID, obviously we're depressed and anxious. Suddenly you're disconnected, suddenly there's financial challenges, suddenly there's a threat of a disease that we don't know anything about, and is it going to kill you or a loved one? Obviously that's you wouldn't be human if you weren't anxious about that. It doesn't make you clinically depressed or clinically ill. You do not have a neuropsychiatric brain disease because you're worried about COVID, but that's what we're being told. So we entered into this COVID pandemic already with people dying younger, and now it's getting worse because what do they want to do? They want to slap a label on you and say, oh, you have clinical anxiety. Now you need this drug, which is going to mess up your brain. And I'm talking about things like antidepressants and so on. But you don't need that. You just need to be helped to manage what's going on in your life. You need someone to hear your story. COVID has affected me like this. How do I get help? I was traumatized at X. How do I get help? I was bullied. Do you see what I'm saying? You have a narrative. You don't need a clinical label to validate what you're going through, as I already said. You need to recognize that each and every one of you are valid as humans. Your experiences are valid, and it's okay to own them and then fix them. The guilt, the shame, the condemnation, own them. Don't be scared of them. Own all of it so that you can fix it, because research shows that the more you suppress it, the more you damage your brain, the more you damage your body, the more you damage your mind, and your life will just get increasingly messy. Okay? But if you own it, research shows that and that's my research plus recent research coming out of Tokyo and Texas, of all places, the two combinations, the two T's, Tokyo and Texas, that confirm what I found in my most recent clinical trials, and that's that if you look at depression and anxiety and frustration and anger and shame and condemnation and disassociation, not as scary things to hide away from, but as messages, helpful messages. You might be sobbing your way through the depression, but if you embrace it, you control it. You shift the power balance. But if you suppress it, that's what makes things worse, and I'm going to show you what it does in the brain. Okay, so how are you going to do all that? You're going to learn how to neurocycle. Neurocycle is something I've been working on for 38 years. It's had years of scientific research. Every word coming out of my mouth I can back up scientifically. Why is that important? Science is completely and utterly spiritual. What do I mean by that? I'm going to fall over in these shoes. I'm so used to wearing, from doing Zoom conferences now, I'm so used to wearing my flat, these tennis shoes, whatever you call them. In South Africa, we call them tackies. What a word. Anyway, that I've forgotten how to walk in high shoes, so I hope I don't fall over. But they're cute shoes, and I've been desperate to wear them again, so there you go. Let me adjust my brain. My brain's doing a bit of adaptation. Mind, change brain to wear shoes, don't fall. There, done. Okay, I just did a neurocycle. Okay, so now I completely lost my train of thought. Never mind, we'll come back. So we're going to learn how to neurocycle, which is the concept that I've developed. I wanted to know right from day one, if you can manage your mind, what is the mind? What is it in the first place? And how do you manage it? And what is the thought? What is the memory? What are emotions? What control do we have as humans? Can we direct this change in our mind? And what about our brain? What's that relationship? What is mind? What is brain? And how do we change the brain? Can we direct the neuroplasticity of the brain? My answer to you all these years later is yes, you can. Thousands and millions actually of people that we've reached now. You can learn to control your mind. You can learn to direct the neuroplasticity of your brain, which means neuro means brain, plastic means to change. So when you use the neurocycle, you are learning to direct the neuroplasticity of your brain. You are directing the changes in your brain, which means you're directing the changes in all 37 to 100 trillion cells of your brain and body. That is kind of powerful. Look at yourself. You are made of 37 to 100 trillion cells. Somewhere in that region. You control every single one of those, every moment of every day. And the quality of your physical state is dependent on the quality of your mind, because your mind is the power, the spiritual, huge spiritual power that drives it. So science and spirituality, that was where I was before I nearly fell, are totally connected. They're two sides of the same coin. The Bible tells us the story, and the science tells us how the story works. So science comes from the word sclera, which means knowledge, and God is the source of all knowledge. So when we honor science, we honor God because we are understanding how we work and how the world that we live in works and the relationship between the two. Okay, so I just wanted to put that to bed because I have been challenged and I never understand why in churches about, how can you be spiritual and scientific? How can you not? And if you don't like science, here's another one. If you're scared of science, then please don't use a cell phone because the science of technology created your cell phone. In fact, don't wear clothes because the science of clothing manufacturing is a science. Don't be in here with all this. This is all science. Science is knowledge. Science is how things work. Okay, so all I'm doing is helping you understand how your mind works and how to get your mind working properly so that you can get your brain and body working properly. Okay, so I'm going to tell you as much as I can, but I'm really encouraging you to get hold of my materials because they teach you. Therapy costs hundreds of dollars, as you know. This is a few dollars that you're going to invest in understanding your mind. And if your mind is right, you change your life. Okay, so toxic thoughts are like a virus. So what is a toxic thought? A toxic thought is the result of something. It's the result of your mind in action. So just think of it like this. I'm going to set the scene and then I'm going to show you a bunch of, we're going to get to this pathway to empowerment in a moment. I'm just setting the scene for this particular slide. And the slide's coming up. So we all know about the COVID virus. If you don't, then I don't know what planet you've been living on. But it's a virus. And we know we have an immune system. We all got a crash course in immunology this last year. So if you didn't understand immunology, you know you have an immune system. Just recently we discovered, only a few years back, we discovered that the brain has its own separate immune system that talks to the body's immune system. Your immune system is there to help protect you. So when the virus invades your body, it sends out macrophages and B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes to fight the incoming virus and to fight infected cells and gobble them up and digest them and try and get rid of them. Okay, so this is why we need to boost our immune system. So here, just a little sidebar note. When you Neuro Cycle, when you manage your mind, when you renew your mind and bring thoughts into captivity, you increase your immunity by those same factors. You will increase immunity by that up to 81%. You need a strong immune system in this current society. Okay, so coming into this, as I said, we already had what we call the deaths of despair, people dying younger. Then COVID hit, so we've got this extra layer on this extra layer. For the first time in human history, we added, not the first time in human history, every time human history hits these kind of major things, what comes out of it is that tremendous creativity and change happens, like in the Renaissance, like in this, if you look at any major global disaster, it generates massive change in the world. So we're in a very interesting period of history where we will see massive changes. Hopefully, one of those changes will be how we manage our mind again. Because for the last 40 years, mind has been pretty much put on the side by the majority of scientists. And the gold standard of managing mind has been to go very biological and focus on it being an illness like cancer or diabetes. So the standard message most of you have been exposed to is that if you're battling, if you have depression, you have a chemical imbalance, and that you need a drug to fix the chemical imbalance. That's not even science. It was a myth. Not even the top scientists will even say that. Okay, so that's a lie that we've been sold, and it has caused a new kind of problem, which is what we call iatrogenic brain diseases, which in English means we have mismanagement of mind, which has led to a whole new type of mental health issue. So, but we can get back. We can get control back. I am all about teaching you about how to manage you so that you can get control back of your life and not feel like you are being controlled by something that you don't understand, by some scary neuropsychiatric brain disease that has hit you or is in your brain and is now jumped out of you and it's affecting you. No, that's not the case. I validate, as I said, and I'm going to keep saying this, I validate the pain. In fact, I validate it more. Giving you a label invalidates it. But by saying I care and have permission and let's work through it and let's find the root cause of it, that changes things. And that is renewing your mind. That is bringing the thought into captivity. Jesus didn't go into the garden and ask the disciples, so, hey, get me some opioids, get me some Prozac, get me out of here. Jesus faced his pain. You want to know what to do with mental health? Jesus went in the garden. Are you getting in the garden? Are you embracing, processing, and reconceptualizing? When we talk about capturing our thoughts and renewing the mind, we are talking about what Jesus did in the garden, which is face your stuff. Neuroscience shows us that if we embrace something, as soon as you are aware, you have already weakened that toxic thought. Okay, so what we're doing with mind management, with renewing the mind, with capturing thoughts, is we are activating the immune system of the brain and the body to fight that toxic thought. Because the brain and the body's immune system recognize the toxic thought in exactly the same way as the brain and the body recognize COVID being a foreign invader. Isn't that amazing? So a toxic thought's as real as a virus. And toxic thoughts come from our life experiences and how we process them. So it's the traumas of the past, the traumas of the present, the bad habits that we've developed, the little day-to-day things, the acute traumas that blindside us and all that stuff. Okay, so all of those things we're going to be discussing briefly how to manage. Okay, so having set that up, what we can do is learn to become very proactive. We can learn when we are instructed to bring all thoughts into captivity and be in a state of renewing our mind. It's a very proactive state. It's a very I'm in control state. It's a very stand back and observe your own thinking, feeling, and choosing. It's not just a bamboozling through life and boom, 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 as things happen, you feel like you've been slapped. The end of the day comes and you just think, whoa, I don't even know what happened. And you feel burnt out. No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's what creates the mental mess. And that's how most people are living. But you don't have to live like that because mind is malleable as brain is malleable, which means that you can renewing it itself implies that you can train it as a skill. So when you understand what brain is and mind is, you can train your mind. Like you go to the gym. Do you think these Super Bowl players got to be in the teams just like that? No. They trained. So we all understand that. That's not even something we even have to begin to try and understand. Someone who's an Olympian athlete, you go to the gym yourself, whatever, you're not good straight away. We all understand that. But when it comes to mind, we don't pay any attention to it. We don't spend times developing our mind. And every single person in this room and everyone who can hear me and everyone on this planet, you have the ability to have an Olympian mind. Did you just hear what I said? You should be spending your entire life, because the goal is an Olympian athlete in your mind. Because that is your goal. That is not even so much your goal. That's how you designed. All you're doing is literally unlocking a skill that is there that you need to develop. How do I know that? Well, you're made in God's image. I would say God's an Olympian mind expert. So if we are made in God's image and God is thinking, feeling, and choosing, love, whatever, God gave us this ability to think, feel, and choose, which is mind. Mind is thinking, feeling, and choosing. Mind is think, feel, choose. Your mind is always in action. Mind, you are always thinking. When you think, you will feel. You can't think without feeling. And when you think and feel, you will choose. You are always thinking, feeling, and choosing. There isn't even 3 seconds that you're not thinking, feeling, and choosing. Look how I've glued my fingers together. Those 3 go together. You are always thinking, always feeling, always choosing. You're thinking, feeling, choosing right now, which is your mind in action. At 400 billion actions per second, you are thinking, feeling, and choosing to convert my words and the images you are seeing, which are light waves and sound waves, into physical protein structures in your brain, and changes in your DNA, and changes in your mind. Did you understand any of what I just said? Because it's very significant. Right now, you're in a major Genesis moment. You are creating physical substance out of my words. You are taking my words and images. These are sound waves. The only reason you understand what I'm saying is because your mind took the sound wave and the light wave, and the electromagnetic waves, everything I'm generating, and your mind did a think, feel, choose at 400 billion actions per second, and the end product was a thought about what I'm saying. And that thought is then imprinted into your brain because your mind is external to your brain, but it uses your brain to then put this thought, that the stuff I'm giving you, into your brain like a tree. So you're growing trees of my words in your brain. As I started speaking, I planted a seed, the roots grew, immediately the tree trunk grew, and the branches are growing. The roots are what I'm saying, the tree trunk is your perspective of what I'm saying, and the branches and the leaves are your interpretation in terms of your behaviors and emotions of what I'm saying, which will then produce what you say and what you do. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So if you have a toxic experience, that's the seed. The origin story is the roots immediately. The roots produce a perspective. You're abused as a child. Your perspective is you can't trust people, shame, whatever. And that goes into that perspective, life sucks, whatever that is, goes into the branches, which are the behaviors and the emotions, which then are how you behave and how you feel about yourself in relationships and in life, which then is not, it's toxic, so therefore generates warning signals of depression and anxiety. Do you get what I'm saying? So my argument is then, if we are recapturing our thought, what are we going to do? We're going to capture that thought. We're going to capture that toxic thought. How am I going to even find it? By looking at the warning signals, like your alarm wakes you up in the morning and hopefully you get up. Okay? That you've got to pay attention to the warning signals. What are they? The depression, the anxiety, the fear, the shame, the behaviors, the perspective. Those are warning signals. We'll unpack this much slower in a moment. I'm just giving you the big picture. And then that will then take you down to your perspective of life in general, and then the root story. And until you uproot, until you embrace, process, and reconceptualize, you're not going to get through this. Jesus demonstrated this in the garden. You want to know mental health? You want to know Neuro Cycle? Jesus did it in the garden. Okay? Wow, how do I know? Jesus embraced by going into the garden. Jesus knew exactly what he was going to face. He did not run away from it. He asked it to be removed. And we all talk about Jesus took the sin. It's much deeper than that. Jesus experienced and shows us that fear, anxiety, depression, trauma. Listen, if you're sweating blood, that shows mind-brain integration. You can sweat blood. If you are anxious enough, you will affect your autonomic nervous system. Your capillaries will dilate so much, constrict so much that you will actually can burst the capillary. And that blood will come out of your sweat. Okay, so that's very real. That shows us that your mind and body are linked. Jesus showed us in the garden that in the embracing, there will be physical sensation. There will be an experience. It is very difficult. It is hard. It is impossible. And it's going to get a lot worse. Jesus got beaten to a pulp. And then Jesus got on the cross. But before, while he was in the garden, he turned to the disciples and he said, not give me the Prozac, I'm being facetious, but Jesus didn't say that or swap places or whatever. Jesus said, can you but be with me for an hour? Can you be with me for about an hour? So therefore, we have to be in community. It's not about you, it's about you in the world. And that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that someone else can fix your problems. You cannot fix anyone's problems. If you're a coach, if you're a therapist, if you're a counselor, stop trying to fix other people. And if you are the one on the other receiving end, stop trying to get fixed by other people. If you're a mom, speak to me. I'm always trying to fix my kids. I've had to learn not to. Okay, you can't fix your kids. You can't fix anyone. You can't fix your husband. You can only be a support. And while we are trying to fix others, we are damaging ourselves and we're damaging others, because you have to go through this pain. But you can have the support. Any of you have seen Lord of the Rings? If you haven't, go watch it, because it's unbelievable about life. And Frodo and Sam are friends, and Frodo has to carry this ring, and this ring represents the pain and toxicity of life. And only Frodo can carry his ring. Only you can carry your ring. And he's got to go through this epic journey, which is life, and eventually get this dealt with and get it into the volcano. And there's so much that happens on the way. But interestingly enough, Sam plays an interesting role. You're laughing. So if you haven't watched, go watch. It's homework after this. You can watch that and read my book, Homework, okay? And you'll change your life. And send me the emails about how to change your life, okay? So then the interesting thing there is, if you want to understand support, at the end, Frodo's coming up this volcano, and they're dead. They've had enough. He's collapsed on the side. He's done. And Sam says to him, Sam's his best friend, been with him through this whole journey, and he turns to him and says, Frodo, I can't carry your ring, but I can carry you. And that's what we can do for each other. You can be there, the support, okay? And then Jesus then gets beaten. Okay, and then gets to the cross. So it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's the treatment effect. We have got to an age and an era where we're so scared to face pain that we don't actually do anything to get rid of our pain, because we think it's bad. Pain's not bad. Pain is hard, and I'm talking about emotional pain. Physical pain, when you have physical pain in your body, it is telling you that you need to fix something. So emotional pain is something to be embraced. In the West, we've developed this crazy attitude that if you look at those, if you experience anything negative, it's bad. The church is really bad. This is a big sin. You must hide it. That's not going to help anyone. Jesus didn't. You've got to embrace it. You've got to process it. And you've got to reconceptualize it, which means you've got to see it in a different way. Okay, you've got to see it in a different way. And then Jesus did get crucified. That's really got bad. Okay, but then Jesus rose again with the wounds in his hands. What is the wound? Your story, the abuse, the trauma, the bullying, the bad habits. You were maybe lousy to your friend and you feel shame. The shame is there's the wound in your hand, but you own the shame and you apologize to your friend and you make it right. You don't stuff it down. Do you know that only 4% of the church are talking about mental health? Do you know that only 3% of leaders, not just in the church, but in corporate, across the globe, every industry, only 3% of leaders are talking about mental health. In other words, leaders are standing here thinking, ooh, I'm this big leader. I don't have any mental health issues. Listen, guys, this is my field. I've got mental health issues, but I know how to manage them. If you're human, which you are, if you're alive, which you are, I don't see any dead people in here. That means you have a mental mess in your brain. You have a mental mess, you have mental health issues. It's not a bad thing. We've got to stop this ridiculous stigma. It is okay. And in fact, labeling and medicating creates more of a stigma. Guys, turn to each other and say, it's okay to feel crazy. It's okay to feel a mental mess because you are human. Give yourself permission. We've got to move away. People say, oh gosh, you're sitting at dinner and you turn around and say, I've got a neuropsychiatric brain disease. Everyone moves down the table away from you. Social distancing multiplied, okay? But if you'd say to someone, I'm really battling with this situation happened in my life and the story and my kids this or my husband that or this at work, and you tell your story, what are you going to get? Connection. You're going to get support. You're going to get a Sam. Are you a Sam? Are you being a Sam? Because you're going to be a Sam, you should be a Sam, and you should also accept a Sam in your life. In other words, support. But if we start making it scary, it changes the whole thing. You can tell someone you've got cancer, you will get support. You tell someone you've got a neuropsychiatric brain disease, they avoid you. Okay? So you don't want to do that. We talk so much about dropping the stigma of mental health. Leaders, all of us, everyone, 100% of the world, not just the 3% of leaders, need to start talking about this. We need a narrative, but we need to understand the story of our lives. We need to reconnect as humanity again and stop being scared about it and stop using Scripture as a magic potion. Someone comes to you. Do you know how many DMs and messages, thousands that we get every week saying, I love Jesus, I believe in Jesus, but I'm so depressed I can't talk to anyone about it. They'll think that do not have enough faith. What has the church done that we don't allow people to come in here, which is a hospital, and say, I'm really battling? And not just whack a prayer on, pass the buck prayer. I've prayed for you, now you're fine. Go, and what's wrong with you? Why aren't you fine? That's terrible. It's demeaning. It is demoralizing. Suicide rates are up high because people lack hope. And if you constantly told you're a big bad sinner and you're not applying your faith well enough, the suicide rates in the church are horrific. And amongst the youth, 18 to 25-year-olds, it was bad before the pandemic. It's even worse now. We have got to change how we talk about our minds and how we are interacting with each other. We've got to be supporting and recognizing. We've got to stop pretending that it's like pretending that I've got it under control. We've got to recognize that we're vulnerable and we've got to help each other in our vulnerability. That's beautiful humanity. That is what Jesus was saying. Own the holes in your hands and share how you got through. That's support. That is real support. That is really being a Sam. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to have a pathway to empowerment. And this is what I did with my clinical trials. Now, my most recent clinical trials, that always sounds so scary, but I've put them in here in a simple version in the first part of this book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, in a simple way, because you need to understand how scientific bringing all thoughts into captivity is. That's why I do what I do, so that you can really understand, if I do this, this is going to happen. And here's the evidence. The evidence, when God says, when we see Scripture calling us to operate in love, when we see the model of Jesus, there is going to be an impact. When you rise with those wounds in your hand and your story, that means you've reconceptualized the story. It's still there, it's still part of you, but now it's become your testimony. To use Christianese. I don't like to use Christianese because I think people don't even listen if you say Christianese. They're so used to hearing it, you don't even hear what I'm saying. But seriously, your story is something that you want to share with others, okay? So when you learn to do that, when you learn to embrace, process, and reconceptualize, that's when life transforms. You will be empowered. So what I showed in my research, I took an experimental group and a control group. I did random controlled studies. I did the gold standard of research. So it was very scientific, but it was so totally spiritual. And what I did was I got people in the study that were really battling, people that were suicidal, so depressed they couldn't function, relationship issues, you name it, they had it, okay? We got a cross-section of people of ages, etc. And what we did was the experimental group were given how to capture thoughts and how to renew the mind through the Neuro Cycle. So they were given how to self-regulate through the Neuro Cycle. And as I said, I am going to help you understand this. I just want to, as I said, I'm just doing this in layers. Okay, and what we found was an incredible difference in how they coped. So at the beginning of the study, they were broken. We looked at their brain, we looked at their blood, we looked at their DNA, we looked at their psychological, and most importantly, we heard their story. Okay, so for example, some of the subjects came in at the beginning of the study saying, I am depression. Literally, I'm clinically depressed, I'm giving up. But within 3 weeks, they were saying, I am depressed because of, I am not depression. Depression's not my identity. I'm now, and by 63 days, because it takes 63 days to change a habit, therefore change behavior, and we'll see all these slides as well in a moment. By 63 days, they were saying, I know what to do. And that's where I am in my life, and I'm getting better all the time. I mean, I developed this concept, and I've been using it for years. And I still have a mental mess, but I know how to get, if I have an argument with Mac, we know very quickly how to get out of it. If something happens and throws me and I get hit with an acute trauma, I know how to get out of it. Guys, go and listen to my podcast, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. I'm very authentic. I'm very open and I'm teaching you how to apply these things. The difference is that I'm not all there, but I'm getting there. I really am getting there. I can bring myself back from an acute trauma situation, from a toxic trauma that is starting to manifest, which I thought I had got rid of, but I hadn't. I can manage those day-to-day moments where maybe you get into an argument or you suddenly have imposter syndrome from looking at Instagram. Come on, put your hand up. We all get it. And I've got to get now in front of 1,000 people or 5,000 people or 10,000 people and do a presentation. And I've got to look all, I know how to do that. And that's what I want to help you do, because that is mind management. That is living a life of prayer. What I've learned to do is tap into my inner wisdom, which comes from where? God. It is my made in God's image. The core of who I am and the core of who you are is one of love, survival. We are literally wired for love. And we see that in neuroscience. There isn't a neurobiology and biology. There isn't a single structure in your brain or body that is wired for toxicity. But we have free will. So we've got this inner core of wisdom, and we're supposed to be drawing on that, but we've got free will, so we can think, feel, and choose. And we don't always think, feel, and choose in the best way. Okay, so I'm telling you when the renewing of the mind and capturing thoughts is when we read those scriptures, it is telling us the importance of learning how to react and respond in the correct way. And that's a continual process. So you constantly got to live in the state of prayer. So I have trained myself to live in a state of prayer where I'm constantly connecting with the Spirit of God. And when I slip out of it, I feel it fast because I've learned to recognize the signs in my body. You see, your non-conscious mind, which you'll be learning about, is the spiritual part of you. Your mind is basically all spiritual. It's your soul and your spirit, okay? And then your body is the physical, brain and body. But I've learned to connect with God on that level. And I've trained myself to get there. And that's what the Neuro Cycle will do. The Neuro Cycle will teach you how to have this constant communication so that you don't live this separated, come to conference, come to church, all fine, and then go back into life and you can't apply it. There's like this gap between the space between what you know you should do and what you're actually doing. I'm providing you with what to do in that space. How to take what you know instinctively, which is your wired for love design of your brain, your optimism bias of your mind, the core of who you are, your wisdom mind, whatever you want to call it, you're made in God's image, that. I'm telling you how to tap into that so that you can then apply what you know you should be doing to actually doing it. Okay, to give you that sense of mental peace. I'm also teaching you how to, once again, not knock yourself down when you go through those emotions, but to embrace them as helpful messengers as opposed to scary things that you've got to suppress. When you suppress them, you cause brain damage. When you don't deal with them, you cause brain damage. So if you are envious of someone that has got something that let's just say that you have a conversation and someone's in this conference and someone's now achieved something or got something that you wish you had and you're smiling sweetly, but inside you're envious, and you know you shouldn't, so you smile even sweeter, and then you sing even nicer in the praise and worship because you feel guilt, but you don't deal with it. You actually just cause brain damage. You can be singing all the worship songs you want, but you haven't dealt with that issue, you have brain damage. You are playing games. You are singing that worship song as a Band-Aid. You need to deal with that stuff. You need to own it. You need to say, it's okay, I feel envious. It's okay. Now, what am I going to do about it? It's okay to feel it, but now you've got to fix it. How are you going to fix it? What are you going to do with that? That is embracing, processing, and reconceptualizing. And that's what the Neuro Cycle does. It's 5 steps that you learn to do all of that, and you can apply it on that moment-by-moment basis, dealing with the toxic stuff, the toxic habits, etc. When you do that, you will go into a pathway of empowerment. You see, learning to renew your mind, learning to capture thoughts is an empowering process. So what's empowerment? You've got the power back. God gave you the ability to think, feel, and choose. That is powerful. You are always thinking, feeling, and choosing, as I just said, at 400 billion actions per second. So how you are thinking, feeling, and choosing, which is your mind, determines the quality of your mind, which is constantly changing because life is constantly being experienced. From the moment you open your eyes, you're experiencing life with your mind. So, and it's changing all the time. And because your mind works through your brain is changing. So here's my underlying premise of the pathway to empowerment, and of mind and brain and all this stuff. If your mind is always working and always changing, because experiences are never the same, then your brain is always changing, so it's always happening. So don't you want to control that process? Because if you don't control it, it's going to be messy. So whatever's not controlled, whatever's not self-regulated, is going to be a mental mess. And that mental mess will then affect your brain and your body, and it will manifest in your behaviors, which is your work, your relationships, your life, etc., etc. And that creates this feedback loop of being burnt out and feeling like, oh my gosh, my head, I can't handle this anymore. To the point where maybe you get suicidal, okay? Where you just start losing hope. That doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to live in a state of mental mess. You can actually accept your mental mess for what it is and fix it. That's much more hopeful. Are you getting this? Okay, so that's a pathway to empowerment. If you look up on the screen, we're going to put this up on the screen again. This is our sense of control over our lives, autonomy, okay, and our sense of agency. God gave you agency, but to refine that agency or that autonomy or that sense of control, God advises us to bring the thought into captivity. And renew to what? To the gold standard, which is what? God. That's how simple it is. You should be like, you either have dazed you or you don't know what I've just said. I'm going to say it again. Let me be like my friend Bishop Jakes. Let me say it again. Let me sweat all over you, and I'm not going to sweat because it's COVID. But you didn't get that, so I'm going to say it again. Okay? Your sense of agency is a gift from God. Agency means that you have choice. You are not a robot. You are not an avatar. You do not dance to the DNA. You control your DNA. That means you have agency. So you can choose whatever you want. What a gift. But God says, be aware there's a consequence. I lay before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Choose life. There's your agency. You have agency. Stop turning around and blaming the devil. The devil was defeated. You do not believe what Jesus did at the cross if you keep blaming the devil. Stop. It's a big excuse to pass the buck, okay? Take responsibility for your brilliance, your agency, your autonomy, and learn to use it in the right way. So that is the renewing of the mind component. So your autonomy is you can choose, but so you can think, you can feel, and you can choose. The consequence is a thought. The thought is that tree that then produces your behavior and your action. If that behavior and your action is toxic, then you need to be self-regulated to capture that thought and renew it against the standard, which is God's love, which is your inner core wisdom, which I've just been speaking about. Your wired for love design of your brain. So if you're wired, your optimism bias. So in other words, if you don't do that, you're causing brain damage. You're causing damage in your heart, in your immune system. You're lowering your immune system function. But if you do take agency, just the moment of taking agency, within seconds, you've transformed 1,400 neurophysiological responses. If you don't know what I've just said, this is also what I've just said. In the moment of saying, okay, I feel envy, you have gone from 1,400 neurophysiological responses damaging your brain and your body to 1,400 neurophysiological responses, healing your brain and your body in that shift, in an instant. So now, in this more resilient state, you can now unpack why was I envious and what can I do to fix it. That is health. That is brain health, mind health, body health. That's prayer. Prayer is not this, Holy Joe in church. Prayer is that lifestyle. We've got to translate what we do here into our everyday moments. That is true prayer, okay? And that's why I'm so passionate and adamant that you learn how to do this. Okay, that includes, which includes the amount. So what happens is that when you get this level of agency, you can look at the toxic thoughts in the way I just described. Look at that envy, look at that depression, the stuff that you face, the barriers and things that you see. You can turn those into opportunities. So this is what I showed in my research. This is what the research confirms we see in Scripture. When you take the agency and align the agency with God's grace and love, you will have the measure that's renewing. What are you renewing against? God's love. So what if the envy that you've just experienced with this scenario I created? What if you took hold of that and you renewed that? Envy is not the way. But there's some reason why you feel the envy. There's some self-esteem thing going on. So instead of beating yourself up with guilt and condemnation, you now say, okay, well, I had that envy. Why? What is the underlying reason? And then you fix that. And then part of the fixing that is to go, maybe you need to say an apology to that person. Maybe you don't need to say it, whatever. You just got to make sure that you clean yourself up. Okay, and if you are impacting if that other person is hurt by your envy because your behavior towards them is bad, then you do need to fix the relationship. But that's something that you've got to work out. So you're getting this. You've got to capture your thoughts. You can do it every 10 seconds, and you're renewing it to the perfection, to love. So here, if you have a look at this next thing, this image shows the pathway to empowerment, okay? So as you get increased autonomy by taking control of your thought life, your mental health, you become more aware of your issues, okay? So you get more awareness, and that's what you want. You want awareness. You don't want to push things down. And you also increase your capacity to deal with toxic thoughts and control toxic stress. Don't we all want to do that? Do you want to be ruminating on those toxic thoughts and overthinking and your mind going crazy and getting stuck in anger and getting stuck in imposter syndrome and people-pleasing and whatever it is? When we change our perspective, we see opportunities instead of barriers. Okay? The process leads us to become more empowered so we can control our lives by controlling our minds. So as you increase your autonomy, as you increase your awareness, your toxic thoughts get under control, toxic stress gets under control, and barriers are no longer seen as barriers but as opportunities, and you are in empowerment. This is what you're going to do. This is what 81% control means. Okay, so moving on with more images. What is mind? So now we're going to come and see a series of slides that are going to take everything I've said and I'm going to unpack it in different ways with slides and with imagery to help you understand this process. And then we'll get into the Neuro Cycle very soon. So what is mind? Mind is not your brain. Here's your brain, as I held up earlier on. This is your brain. Your brain's in your head. Your brain is part of your physical. Your brain and your body collectively are 1% of who you are. So your one brain, see there, 1%, your physical part, it's made of 37 to 100 trillion cells. Because that's the physical, I'm stressing it. Now the physical is important. Just because it's 1% more or less, it doesn't mean it's unimportant. You can't express yourself without your brain and your body. That's a beautiful gift from God, okay? So you've got this beautiful brain and body that's extremely complex because you are extremely complex. Okay, so the mind is outside the brain but connected to the brain. So it's like, it's 99% of who you are. It's non-physical, spiritual. And the mind is how we think, feel, and choose. Are you kind of getting this? All right, so here's an example. When a toxic virus like COVID invades you, it's coming from outside into your body. So we all understand the virus is there and it comes in. And then the manifestation happens in your body. Got that? That's what your mind is like. Your mind, not that your mind's toxic, but can be, but your mind is outside coming into your brain. So and we see this in science. We can use electromagnetics and quantum physics and different types of physics to understand gravitational fields, to understand mind. If you remember, here's another analogy. Think of the days when you were at school. Still, some of you may still be at school. And think of, I hope you all did this experiment. where you've got a piece of white paper and then a pile of iron filings. Do you remember this vaguely at all? And then you put a magnet in the middle, and suddenly all the iron filings went from a pile into a shape, and it would look like a little spider around the magnet. Okay, so using that analogy, the iron filings will stay in a pile until you put the magnet there. It's the magnet that creates, there's a relationship between the magnet and the iron filings, and that relationship is seen in that shape, that the arrangement of the electromagnetic fields around the magnet. So you use the iron filings to see that field, but it's not the iron filings that's the field, it's the result of the field. So the field is your mind. Okay? And you have a unique mind. I can't steal yours, you can't steal mine. But I can enhance yours, or I can damage yours by my interactions with you. So we've got to be very careful. You know what this feels like. You're around people that are like just constantly negative and complaining, and you kind of feel, and you feel like you're in a happy mood, and then someone walks into the office and they're snapping, and suddenly you feel like that. So we've got to protect ourselves because we absorb. Now, you want to have empathy, but you can't have empathy if you're absorbing someone else's toxicity, because you're absorbing a distorted version of the gravitational field. So the magnet's gone all weird. Okay, so your magnet's like your brain, and the iron filings are like the shape of the effect of your mind. But we can't see your mind, so we're using the shape of the iron filings because we know there's a force there. So you can't see electromagnetic fields, so we use the iron filings to see it. Does that make sense? Okay, so you've got this force around you like a magnet has, and your body has it too. Einstein did work on this too, where he spoke about the photoelectric effect. So right now, all of us are emitting photons from our body in these fields, and they're unique to you. This is why you can do something that no one else can do, and why it's so important not to be envious. And if you are, you have to find the core, because it's going to affect your magnetic fields and your brain. And your brain magnet won't work as well. So right now, all of us are emitting these fields. Now, I don't know, here's another example. Let's say you have an argument with someone, and their whole body's going like this, and their hands are going like that, and it actually feels like they're shooting a little BB gun at you. You know what a BB gun is? Or paintball? You know, it feels like you're being hit by stuff. You are. You're being hit by something you can't see, but you're being hit by photons coming from the gravitational field, which is your mind. Your mind is emitting those. Okay, so your mind goes through the brain, and then literally that combination emits that field. So your mind is this force, and you can control it. It's spiritual. This gravitational field is spiritual. You know, the Bible talks a lot about the invisible becoming visible. That's what we're talking about here. Your mind is this invisible. The spiritual side of you is invisible. So your mind is your spirit and soul, this invisible thing, and then we have this body that it works through. Does that make kind of sense of the mind-brain connection? So they're not the same thing. So now you can go teach someone, when you go from here, that the mind is not the brain, okay? If they start talking about it. So here's another image that really shows us so nicely. This is a real human brain, a real alive human connected to very advanced brain technology, and as they are thinking and feeling and choosing in response to whatever they were thinking, feeling, and choosing about, in other words, their mind was experiencing something, this is the mind, that thinking, feeling, choosing is moving through the brain, and the brain is responding. So the mind is the generator, the brain is the responder. And the brain is responding electromagnetically, chemically, and genetically. Do you remember I said earlier on that you're taking my words and the things you're seeing, which are sound waves and electromagnetic light waves and 400 billion actions per second, through your thinking, feeling, choosing, you're converting these into things in your brain? Do you remember that? Anyone want to repeat that statement? Okay, this is what it looks like. This is what's happening in your brain right now. This is your spirit moving through your brain. And each of you have your own unique pattern, because each of you perceives what I'm saying in your own unique way. So this is the force of mind. A dead brain, we will not see this in a dead brain, because there's no mind innovating it. Your body needs your mind, your spiritual part of you. Job 32:8, the breath of life in you. Okay, this is the breath of life. Mind is breath of life. Are you getting this? And we have the core, perfect mind. So now, let me give you another analogy, because that mind, this thinking, feeling, choosing, that you're just seeing there, creates stuff. The result of mind is a thought. So a thought is a real thing, and a thought looks like a tree, which is why I use the analogy of a tree. We talk about the thoughts in the brain having an arbor-like structure. Now, like a tree's got roots, and a tree and a trunk, stem, whatever, and branches, so do your thoughts. As I mentioned earlier on, the experience is the seed, and then the roots grow, which is the origin story, and then you grow the trunk, which is the perspective, and into the branches, which is how you perceive what you've just experienced in the root form. So the branches are the data and the emotions of how you perceive what you've experienced. So let's say that you are traumatized as a young child and you suppress that, but you then create a coping mechanism, but as you experience it, as it happens, that's the seed and the roots, which is then the perspective grows, then the branches grow, which is then, if it's repeated or if it's never dealt with, maybe it happens once, maybe it happens twice, maybe it happens repeatedly. Either way, the more it happens, the stronger this becomes, but it's an experience that's very profound. It's there in your brain. It wouldn't be healthy. That would be a toxic one that I'm describing. The roots being the experience, the origin story, the tree trunk being the perspective, I am shame, I can't form relationships, or whatever it is, and then the branches being how that manifests in your emotions and your data of your thoughts, which then manifests in what you say and what you do. So all of this produces what you say and what you do. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So the thought is what you built. A thought is a tree. Like a tree is made of branches, thoughts are made of memories. So what are memories? The branches, the tree branches and the root branches in the thought tree. You getting this? You've got millions of these. So here's another analogy to picture this. There's a huge forest. You're looking at this huge forest. You're in a helicopter. The helicopter, you are flying. That's your conscious mind. Okay, where your conscious mind is when you're awake. Consciousness, awake mind. But when you go to sleep, your consciousness switches off. So what's operating? Non-conscious, N-O-N. The non-conscious operates when you're awake as well. So the non-conscious mind, N-O-N, non-conscious mind, is awake 24/7. It's the dynamic, intelligent part of you that is connected to the inner core wired for love. It's where all your experiences, from in the womb to at whatever age you are at life, every experience is stored in your non-conscious mind as these trees, and in your brain as protein trees. So in your non-conscious mind, that outside of your mind part, the gravitational fields, you've got these forests, these kind of wavy gravitational field forests, and every tree in the forest is an experience you've had, okay? And in your brain, it also looks like a forest, but they're forests that are made of protein, so they look very much like trees. And you store that experience in every DNA, in the DNA of every cell of your body. You store your memories in 3 places. And the memories are inside thoughts in 3 places. So when you experience something, it goes into your mind, into your brain as these forests, and into your DNA to change. So every cell of your body also retains the memory. And that is why when you recall a memory, you feel it. Okay? And you feel the data. So it's not just data. It's not just what happened. It's also how you felt about what happened and how you felt physically about what happened. So our non-conscious mind and our body are always 10 steps ahead of the conscious mind. So the conscious mind is always a bit slower. So we are consciously, it takes a bit of time for the conscious mind to catch up with the non-conscious mind. So we can train ourselves to actually tune into the non-conscious mind. So the non-conscious mind, this forest in the brain, this forest in the mind, so these 2 different types of forests. In the DNA it looks a little different, but it's in the cell, is like a forest. So now here you are in your helicopter, you are the pilot, and you are flying over this forest. So that's your conscious mind, you consciously flying the helicopter. And you're flying over this forest, and you look down, it's the forest of your mind. It's endless, it's infinite, it just never ends. And it's just incredibly beautiful. And if you look closely, there's a strip through the middle that is exquisite. The trees are perfect. They're just absolutely perfect. That's your made in God image. That's the core of who you are. Remember, God's perfect. You're made in God's image, so you have your perfection at the core, the middle of your forest. And that's what you want to tune into. That's your wise mind. When you're praying and connecting with the Spirit of God, that's what you're using to connect perfection to perfection. Got it? On the outside of the forest are beautiful green trees, but they're not as perfect. And there are little ones, which are recent experiences, which are recent thoughts with their little memory branches. And there's medium-sized ones, and there's really big ones that are very established. And most of it's green, but then in between there are clumps of the dark trees. And those then, some clumps are really big and ugly. Others are little, still growing because it's a recent experience. Are you getting the picture? Okay, so that's what your mind looks like in the gravitational part around you and inside your brain. They have actual physical protein trees, chemicals and stuff. In your mind, it's gravitational fields. In your DNA, looks a little bit different. But it's significant because that's why we need to deal with everything, okay? So now you can do this whole journey. The Neuro Cycle is a whole journey. And so you're in the helicopter, and now in the helicopter, you see that there's some trees on fire. So there's some smoke. So what are you going to do? Because you are protecting this mind. Okay? So your conscious mind has this veto power. You can make decisions. So now there's this fire. So there's this smoke. So what are you going to do? You can ignore it and hope it goes away. Maybe just pour a cup of water on and maybe hopefully it goes away. Let's put a little scripture on, a little bit of a Band-Aid. Or you can be brave like Jesus demonstrated, and you can land your helicopter by the fire. Get out of your helicopter and go face the tree and put out the fire in your life. And that's what we talk about when I say embrace, when Jesus gets in the garden. And that's the first part of the Neuro Cycle. You can't fix what you're not aware of or what you choose to suppress. Because what you choose to suppress is causing brain damage. And we saw this in our subjects, and I'll show you what it looks like in a moment. Okay, so this is what you're doing. So your conscious mind awake 24/7, conscious mind only awake when you're awake. That's you in the helicopter, non-conscious mind always operating. So by the same token as you watching, you also have those trees that are the biggest trees in the forest. They're so big that they are able to actually, they can literally send up fumes and whatever, smoke into the helicopter. So they can actually, get to you. They can get to your conscious mind. And sometimes there can be such a lot of fire reaching to the helicopter crashes. That's our life crashing. So when you feel completely broken and completely like disassociating and total psychotic, extreme states of mental health. Does that make sense? But fortunately, you can always rebuild the helicopter. At any point, that helicopter, it's not the end of the helicopter. It can always be built again. So that's a beautiful part, and that's done through mind work. Through your mind, you rebuild the helicopter. But sometimes it sort of crashes. Sometimes it's wobbling in the air because these fumes are kind of affecting it. And that's the kind of concept that is happening here. So what I am telling you, when we talk about capturing our thoughts, we're talking about being aware of what's influencing us as well as what we need to fix. Two things, two ways around. What is influencing this next decision that you make? You're about to get irritated. Why? What's influencing it? So self-regulate. Stand back and observe your own thinking, feeling, and choosing. When you self-regulate, which you can do every 10 seconds, you actually stand back and observe your own thinking, feeling, choosing, and you can feel, I'm getting irritated. I'm about to snap. I'm about to say something nasty. You can stop that. So there you're being in. So now you can say what? And there you see the little toxic tree that's come up, and it's like grab the helicopter, and it's, and there's a reason why you feel like that, especially if you're doing it all the time to the same person. There's a reason you need to go fix that. So you can then do a neurocycle to stop in that moment, to stop yourself getting irritated and snapping. But then at some point you need to go and find the origin of why you keep doing that pattern in your life. Get it? So that's the principle operating here. Okay, so now let me show you some images, some more pictures. When the next slide that you're going to see is this is now what you're doing. As you do this work in the forest, these are actual thoughts inside your brain, these thought trees. And so as you're listening to me now, you're having an experience and you're converting my words into these protein trees in your brain. So that is you growing your brain. That's what's happening. That's you growing a forest in your brain, and it will look similar to that in your mind in the gravitational fields. So you're always doing this. So the whole point of cleaning up your mental mess in the neurocycle is to direct the process. You can control that process. And let's say you're going down one path and it's not a good path, you can stop that and you can reorient and you can change that. That's the power that you have. When you think, feel, and choose, that's what you're doing. You're changing that stuff in your brain. You're directing your neuroplasticity. It's a systematic mind, using your wise mind, the middle of the forest, to systematically identify. So the helicopter's tuning in to the signals from the center of the forest, the wise mind, to go and see what's influencing my next decision and what do I need to fix. Okay? So what will happen when we do that? Let's get to that slide there. Quick summary. The mind's got the non-conscious, subconscious, and conscious. So the only thing I haven't spoken about is the subconscious. The subconscious is the connection between the conscious mind, the helicopter, and the forest, the non-conscious. And you experience the non-conscious, you're experiencing it right now. As I'm speaking, all kinds of thoughts are popping up into your head. Where are they coming from? From the non-conscious through your subconscious. So it's funneled through, so your conscious mind only deals with 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe 5 or 7 things at a time. So as I'm speaking, things are popping up and going back, and this popping up, you know what I'm talking about? So it's funneled through the subconscious. The subconscious is the little bridge. To be unconscious is when you're knocked out on the head with a hammer or something, or you have an anesthetic. That's not to do with mind. So when we talk about mind, we talk about those 3 things there, when we talk about active mind. Okay, then our mind has veto power. This is very important. You are not dancing to your DNA. You are not controlled by some external force. You are you, independent, autonomous, beautiful gift from God, brilliant. You just need to recognize your autonomy. That's what the pathway to empowerment is, and recognize you have veto power. You can override. You can say, I do not want to be ruled by this thought anymore, so I'll manage it now, but I'll go back and do the work. I do not want my relationship to continue like this, so I'm going to start doing the work, okay? And that's doing the work constantly. I've explained what a thought tree looks like with memories. I've told you the rest of it. Okay, our brain wants, let me show you, there's another image now of a tree. So there's just to help you understand this. Our mind is think, feel, choose. The thought is the end product of mind. Thoughts are made of memories. Thoughts are one thought. And the memories are the roots and the branches. You all got that now? Does that make sense? Okay, so they're different things, like mind and brain are different. And then that kind of just summarizes what I said. Then here we go. Let's look at the next slide. Okay, so now in this book, I've put these in here. This is just a couple of these images. This is looking inside your brain. I use QEEG, which looks at the energy response of the brain. So remember that brain with the fire flowing through it earlier on? Do you remember that image? That's the energy response of the brain. Because you're alive, your brain is responding energetically in all these different ways. So the QEEG looks at the response. And there's certain patterns, and I'm not going to go into the science, but there's certain patterns that we know that are when you're in a healthy state of mind and when you're not in a healthy state of mind. And we're still learning a lot about this. And it's not that you can read these techniques only tell us the response of the brain in a very broad sense. These technologies don't read your brain. Your brain's not producing the depression, okay? The depression is a response that you have in your mind to the underlying issue, like I've explained. But what we're looking at, if we can put that back up there again, what we are looking at is those are brain, that's looking inside the brain from the top down. Let me orientate you. So you're looking at the brain from the top down. So you're seeing the nose on the top and the ears on the side. Does that make sense? These are called head maps. Okay, so you'll see it says day 1, 21, and 63, and you'll see that there's 5 along there. There's different wave forms that we look at, and there's the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, and each of them tells us a different story. All of them need to be flowing. All the energy waves need to flow like the waves in the beach. So if you go out to sea, you'll have the huge big swells. Those would be what we call delta. You want lots of delta at night, and you want minimal delta during the day. But if you're living with suppressed stuff that you're not dealing with, you will have lots of delta in the day. If you have lots of delta in the day, you're going to feel very tired, very foggy, and you are going to be feeling anxious and hovering anxiety. Because that is basically a lot of suppression. A lot of people are walking around with a lot of suppressed stuff. That's why I keep encouraging you to get it out and talk about it, okay? And I'm not just saying be aware, go beyond awareness. Then the theta would be as you come in a little bit closer to shore, they're still big swells, but they're not as big. Theta is known as a healing wave. So when it flows in the right amounts, it creates a tremendous sense of peace through your brain, and you'll experience that in your brain and body. You'll experience that as a sense of peace. I'm giving you the broadest overview. Alpha is the bridging wave, and it's the connection between the non-conscious and the conscious. So thoughts and data are very much dealing with the energy levels flowing over the non-conscious mind. All of these flow, but delta and theta is kind of really getting an idea of what's going on there. Then you get, so when alpha is low, it means we don't have insight. We're not introspecting. We're not self-regulating. We're just bamboozling through life. But when you start really digging around, trying to find why am I envious? Why am I snapping? Why is this relationship going on like this? When you self-regulate constantly, when you capture and renew, we'll see an increase in alpha. Because it means that it's through alpha that we can start tapping into the inner wisdom, in other words, speaking to God. When people are really praying, really connecting with God, we'll see increases in alpha, increases in theta. Okay, so there's changes. So then you get beta, which is when your mind's online. When you're conscious and awake, then beta and high beta won't, and gamma will not flow when you're awake. Okay, they flow, or they're very, very, very low. They don't not flow, but they're not active at all. When you come online, beta will flow, which means that you're thinking, you're processing. High beta is when you get those bursts of insight, when you really focus on something. So what we want is, in terms of the C analogy, beta is when the wave is starting to build. High beta is the crest, when it goes white. And then gamma, which is the fifth wave, is the ripple on the beach. And then it goes back in, and then the whole wave thing starts again. That's what we want in the brain. That happens when you self-regulate. When you neurocycle, which is bringing thoughts into captivity, you'll get that balance. Okay, so what is this telling us over here? Now go back to that slide, please. Sorry, go back to, okay, so now the blue there, what that means, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of colors. This is a person in the experimental group at the beginning of the study who was excessively depressed. They tried everything. They were literally ready to check out of life, broken relationships, not coping at work, had tried everything, tried every treatment, medication. They had had enough. They said, I'm just depressed. I'm done. And that's at day one. Their brain, so blue brain shows low energy. Everything's like flatline, like no ripples happening. And that's not healthy. That means low oxygen in the brain. That means low blood flow in the brain. That means that none of the structures can work properly because there's just not enough making them work properly to go through the brain. Just complete flatline. So that person, they then were given the neurocycle. All the subjects in my experimental group were given the neurocycle in app form. So I didn't have the book out at that stage, so they got an app. And the app that they used is called Switch, which is at the moment being upgraded to be called the Neuro Cycle. Okay, 5 more minutes, okay? I'm being self-regulated here. Okay, I'm going to move fast, okay? When you neurocycle, you are going to go from the blue, this is what this person did, by day 21, that was funny. Okay. Without Mac, I would never know what time of the day it is. Seriously, I can just talk forever. Okay? So the gray means that waveform that I described, the normal waveform, has come back into place. So they use the neurocycle every day, 5 steps for 15 to 45 minutes to work on why they were depressed. By day 21, and there's the 5 steps, by day 21, the brain you saw had gone gray. Gray shows that it's stabilized. So by day 21, 3 weeks later, they were saying things like, I know now why I'm depressed. At the beginning of the study, I'm depressed. My life's a mess. By day 21, they were saying, I know why I'm depressed. I'm still anxious and depressed, but I know why, and I'm starting to work on it. So it takes 21 days to embrace, process, and reconceptualize. By day 63, let's just go back to that slide one more time, Mac. Go back to the slide. It's rushing me here. By day 63, their brain had stabilized. Because it takes 63 days to form a habit. So day 21, if they had stopped, the tree in the forest would only be this big. So they knew what to do, but they didn't yet have it under control. If you want to change your behavior, you have to do this for 63 days. That's what my research shows. Okay? It takes 63 days to change a habit, to create behavior change in your life. So the way I've designed the book, the way I've designed the app that goes with the book, is that you work, and I'll give you examples. If you've got toxic trauma, if you've got toxic habits, if you've got acute trauma, if you've got big T trauma, a toxic habit, whatever you want, you actually, it's going faster than I can even speak. Okay? It's going to take 63 days to form a habit, not 21. That little peak you see over there is called a gamma peak. You see it climbing. The climbing part of the graph shows that you are doing what Jesus did, embracing, processing, reconceptualizing. And then as it's going down, it's becoming it's becoming a habit. To then go in your forest as a big, strong tree to affect you, to influence you in the helicopter. So that's what you can learn to do. Quickly, we need to end with what the 5 steps are. I would have liked to have spent more time showing you all the wonderful things that it does, but I can't show you. Where's my neurocycle? Okay, so let's go back to, Mac, let's go back to the neurocycle very quickly. I need 2 more minutes. No, forward. Humor's very good. Laughing's good. There we go. Okay. Okay, so in the book, I teach you exactly how to do these. These steps are very scientific. When you do them, your telomeres, which are parts of your brain that respond to your emotional health, those are going to improve. If those little gold parts over there start shortening and getting they get weak, your biological age will get older than your chronological age. So that means that you increase your vulnerability to disease by 75 to 98%. By neurocycling, you can significantly reverse that in 9 weeks, which is unreal. That's just showing the same thing. So that's showing the same thing. Let's look at the next one. There's the depression. So the depression increased in the control group. They didn't have the neurocycle, and the depression decreased with the neurocycle. These are just some graphs to show you. Let's look at the next one quickly. That's just if you're in your blood. When you are not managing your mind, mental chaos, your homocysteine levels will go up, which means that you're going to have tremendous inflammation in your brain and body. Within 6 to 9 weeks, you can reduce the homocysteine levels. That's what we showed. You can drop them. Cortisol levels will fly when you're in a mental mess. You can drop them. I mean, we looked at many other measures. The point is that there's scientific evidence, these graphs are in the book, to show you that when you neurocycle, this will change, will happen. So let's quickly finish by showing you that if you get the pre-order, if you pre-order, these are all your bonuses. I'm doing a 3-week neurocycle workshop. You're getting all these chapters, how to use it for kids, 1 million bonuses. Take a photo of this and go pre-order your book for yourself and many others. There's also a free seminar on the 27th where I'll be teaching this a little bit slower than I've done it now. And then if you just go to the next slide, Mac, my podcast teaches you how to also do this stuff. So guys, you can see I don't have too much to say, not enough time. I have the support system of books and podcasts, but essentially, do you want to see the last 4 steps? Can we end off with the last? Hey, you got to follow me, stay connected, take a photo, because I will teach you every day how to neurocycle. I'm putting neurocycles in there all the time. So I have lives all the time. I'm here to help you as much as I can. So make sure you follow me on all the platforms. Mac, let's just quickly end with flip back to the 4. They only got the first step. There you go. Next one. There we go. Okay. So first step, gather awareness. You've got to land the helicopter. Then you've got to look at your tree. You've got to start asking yourself questions about why do I have these behaviors? What are my warning signals? So you're gathering awareness of your warning signals. What are they? Emotional warning signals like depression. Physical warning signals, pain in your gut. Emotional, behavioral warning signals, you're getting snappy or withdrawn. And perspective, life sucks. Okay, so you gather awareness of those things, those 4 things, very clearly laid out in the book. Then you reflect, why? Ask, answer, discuss. Then you write, and there's a technique I teach you that really helps you get the 2 sides of the brain working together to dig into that wise forest, to really connect with God. 4th step is you then check what you've written, and you can't cheat on these steps. Each step is doing 38 years of research. You follow this order. This is how you will solve these things, okay? And then the last step is a little action that you do. Now, you can do this in a few seconds. You can do this to just bring yourself back together, like if you just have an argument and you've got to do something. Or in addition, that's the day-to-day, moment by moment. So you use the neurocycle in the moment by moment. And then you also use the neurocycle for the big stuff, like healing toxic trauma. So you land the tree. You see that, okay, this is a big forest. This is what I'll do for now, but I need to spend 63 days working this out. Okay, so that's basically the process, guys. I hope I didn't confuse you. I hope you understood. So thank you so much.